In this section, we'll talk about some options related to modeling existing electrical loads. Here's a brief outline from the handout. There are two main options here related to non-modeled conditions mainly. One option, of course, is to model all the existing conditions. One thing to consider here is whether or not all of the existing is being demolished. If you're just tapping into existing conditions, then in that case you'll want to model everything. So here you can see the air terminal has a flow associated with it. The receptacle is circuited and on a panel. So in this case, much of the existing conditions will remain, and if you're tying into them, then the loads from the existing conditions plus the new conditions will be totaled up in the panel. Another option outlined in the handout is to add loads based on existing conditions that aren't modeled. So if we open up this panel A electric panel board schedule, we can add a spare and type in a given load. You'll see that that affects the panel. We can call that circuit description an existing condition. There's one problem with this that we'll look at in just a minute. By contrast, we can also add a space, which does not allow us to add loads. So here we're just typing a name. So you can see we can't edit any of the values associated with a space. One of the techniques here then is to add a family with a connector, and that connector will want to be associated with a load classification called existing. And then the demand factor for that existing load classification would want to be set at 100%. So we would make a custom demand factor, make sure it's set to 100%, assign that to the existing load classification, and then here's the challenge with spaces. You can see that they can only have lighting and power demand factors. If we select this receptacle, we could assume that this was a special load or accumulation of an existing condition. We can set the overall load here. This is a Revit out-of-the-box family, so it doesn't particularly have all the options that you would typically need, like power factor, for example. If we open that receptacle family and select the connector, we can see that the connector has a load classification option, and that can be mapped to a parameter that could then be edited in the project, or you could set that load classification here if this family was exclusively for existing conditions. So that's a quick look at a couple of ways in which you can model existing electrical loads. There's probably a lot more to be said, but this is just a quick overview for you to consider.